The screen stood at the Duke's right hand at dinner. 3 panels of black lacquer painted with white cranes, and behind it sat a woman that no guest at that table was permitted to see. Sir Humphrey Beckford set down his glass in the middle of the fish course, looked at it the way a man looks at a locked door in his own house, and said, "Your Grace, there is a person behind that screen. I will know who." The Duke of Harewell did not look up from his plate. He was 31 years old, and he had been Duke for 19 months. And in that time, he had learned that the most useful thing a powerful man can do with a demand is to let it stand in the middle of the room until everyone has had a good look at it. "The person behind that screen," he said at last, "is in my employ and under my protection. Neither fact is your concern." "It is an odd household," said Sir Humphrey, smiling around the table at the other guests, inviting them into the joke, "that seats its servants at dinner and its questions nowhere at all." "It is an odd guest," said the Duke, "who counts my chairs." Behind the lacquer and the cranes, in the space between the screen and the wall, where a small writing slope stood on a small table with 2 candles arranged so that her shadow fell away from the panels and not against them, Abigail Holt dipped her pen and took down every word. Sir Humphrey's demand went into the book. So did the Duke's answer. So did the small, wet sound of Sir Humphrey picking his glass back up, which she recorded in her father's manner, in the margin, in 3 strokes that meant the witness drank. She had been at Harewell Court 11 days. She had not yet eaten 1 meal in that dining room, and she had heard all of them. To understand how a woman comes to sit behind a screen at a duke's table, you must go back to February, to a letter with a red seal and a very civil first paragraph. The letter came to Mr. Girdler, the Duke's solicitor, on the 9th of the month, and Mr. Girdler brought it to Harewell Court himself, which was how the Duke knew before breaking the seal that it was bad. It was from the office of Mr. Sopworth of Worcester, acting for Sir Humphrey Beckford, baronet, and it stated, with many compliments, that the late 6th Duke of Harewell had, on the 14th of March 9 years past, at his own table and before witnesses, given Sir Humphrey his personal guarantee against all losses in the Leadwell navigation, a canal scheme since collapsed, and that those losses now stood at £11,000, and that Sir Humphrey held a memorandum of the same evening bearing the late Duke's initials, and that Sir Humphrey, though grieved to press a friend's son, must be paid. "My father," said the Duke, "called the Leadwell scheme a ditch dug by liars for the drowning of fools. I heard him say it. I was 22. What a man says to his son," said Mr. Girdler gently, "is heir, your Grace. What a claimant swears before a jury, with a memorandum in his hand and the other party in his grave, is evidence. Your father's word was worth £11,000 precisely because no one alive can now repeat it." The Duke stood at the window a long time. The lawns of Harewell ran grey under a February sky, down to the elms his grandfather had planted in rows of 11. It was the kind of view that tells a man exactly how much there is to lose. "No one alive can repeat it," he said. "That is not quite true." His father had possessed one habit that the county had found eccentric, and his lawyers had found tiresome, and his enemies, though they did not know it, should have found terrifying. For 26 years, at every meeting of business, every negotiation, every dinner where money was so much as mentioned, there had sat in the corner of the room a quiet man named Duke Holt with a book on his knee, taking down every word spoken in a shorthand of his own keeping. Mr. Holt had been a law writer trained to Mr. Gurney's method and improved past it by 2 decades of his own abbreviations. The 6th Duke had paid him a salary, called him my memory, and trusted him with more of the truth than he gave his chaplain. Duke Holt had died 8 months ago, quietly, of a winter on the chest. And his books, 118 bound volumes of them, had gone where a dead man's tools go, to his daughter. "There was an offer for those books," Mr. Girdler said, consulting his notes. 2 weeks after Holt's funeral, a collector of curiosities, so the letter said, offering £40 for the lot. The daughter declined it. She has declined everything. She lives above Price the stationer in Comberton and takes depositions for such Worcester attorneys as will stoop to employ a woman at half fees, and I am told her hand is faster than her father's. "Can she read his books?" Your Grace, she wrote half of them. He trained her from 7 years old. Toward the end, when his own hand shook, she sat in the corner in his place, and I am told the late Duke never once objected, because the books did not lie, and neither did she. The Duke rode to Comberton himself the next morning, which surprised Mr. Girdler, and did not send for her, which surprised her. He found her in a small, clean room that smelled of ink and cold, with a deal table, a shelf of black books in rows like soldiers, and a fire built small out of arithmetic rather than poverty. She was perhaps 26, dark blonde hair in a low braided knot, a chocolate brown dress with a white collar, ink on the middle finger of her right hand in a stain so old it had become part of her. Green eyes that took his measure the way her pen took a sentence, completely and without comment. She did not curtsy low. She curtsied correctly. He offered her £300 for the books. No, Your Grace. He had prepared himself for negotiation and found that he had not prepared himself for the word no delivered flat, without apology and without heat, the way one states the boiling point of water. You have not heard the figure that follows 300. There is no figure, Your Grace. They are not stock. They are my father's 26 years, and half the words in them were never meant to be bought, which is why they are worth anything at all. She folded her hands. But I know what has brought you, because Sir Humphrey Beckford's claim is in every attorney's mouth in Worcester, and I will tell you what I will do. I will search them myself. I will attend when I am wanted and take down what is said, so that whatever happens next is on the record, too. The books never leave my keeping. 2 guineas a sitting, and when it is done, they come home with me. You have thought this out before I arrived. I began thinking it out, she said, the day a collector of curiosities offered £40 for a dead man's shorthand that not 4 people in England can read. Curiosities are bought by men who want to look at them, Your Grace. These were wanted by someone who needed them to stop existing. The Duke looked at her for a moment, the way a man looks at a hand of cards that is better than he had any right to draw. There is a condition on my side, he said. You will attend, but you will not be seen. My guests will not speak freely in front of a woman with a pen, and what they will not speak, you cannot take down. There is a screen. Something crossed her face and was gone, filed, the way everything about her seemed to be filed. My father sat in the corner in plain view for 26 years. My father, said the Duke, had 26 years to make the county accept it. I have until the summer assizes. You will sit behind the screen, Miss Holt, or this arrangement is worth nothing to either of us. Then I will sit behind the screen, she said, and your Grace will discover in time which of us it hides. She arrived at Harewell Court on the last day of February with 1 trunk of clothes and 4 crates of books, and Mrs. Farrant, the housekeeper who had buried one Duke and did not intend to lose a second to a canal swindler, took a single comprehensive look at her and put her in the blue room over the gardens, which was not where one put a hired clerk, and both women understood each other perfectly and said nothing. The muniment room off the library became hers. She had the crates unpacked in an order of her own, made a fair table of her father's dockets in one long day, and discovered the difficulty by the second evening. Her father had docketed every volume by year and every sitting by date, but the books for the years 1816 through 1818 had stood on the bottom shelf at home through the wet spring of his last illness, and the labels had drunk the damp off the floor and let go of their ink. 9 volumes, anonymous as gravestones with the names weathered off. The 14th of March, 9 years past, was inside one of them, and the only way to it was through all of them, sitting by sitting, line by line. How long? The Duke asked, standing in the doorway of the muniment room on the 3rd evening. He had taken to standing in that doorway. He told himself it was supervision. Each volume holds a year, more or less. A year of my father's sittings is 400 pages. I can read an abstract 40 pages in an evening if the entries are business, fewer if they are dinners, because at dinners everyone talks at once and my father took down all of it. She looked up. Weeks, Your Grace, not days. Your claimant has sworn his memorandum was made at a dinner, and dinners are the slowest reading there is. Then we had better, said the Duke, give you fresher matter to practice on. And that was how the dinners began. There were 3 dinners in March, and they taught the county a new fact, and the Duke several. The new fact traveled fast, as facts do when they are strange. The young Duke of Harewell dined behind a screen, not behind it himself, of course, but with it, a tall, black lacquered thing with white cranes that had stood in his mother's morning room for 30 years, now planted at his right hand at table, with a person behind it. The person was not named. The guests were mostly attorneys and neighbors, and the talk was mostly the Beckford claim, because Sir Humphrey had been generous with his grievance, telling it at every table in the county with his eyes wet and his palms open, a friend's son refusing a dead friend's debt. What the county did not know was that every version Sir Humphrey told was going down in a book. Abigail took his story as it arrived second-hand through the mouths of dinner guests, dated each telling, and laid them side by side, and by the third dinner she had a page her father would have been proud of. In the first telling, the guarantee had been given over port. In the second, it had been given in the library. In the third, there had been a handshake, which was new, and the £11,000 had briefly been 12 before correcting itself. "A true story wears down with telling," she said when the Duke came to the muniment room to read her abstract. "The corners go smooth. A false one grows. He is still building it." The Duke read the page twice. "You take down everything, even what I say. Especially what you say, Your Grace. You are the one they will put questions to under oath." She said it without softening, and he discovered that he had begun to prize the absence of softening the way other men prized flattery. His days were made of people arranging their faces before they spoke to him. Behind her, the pen went on being exact. The routine set itself the way routines do at Harewell, quietly and then permanently. She sat behind the screen through the dinners with her writing slope and her 2 candles placed so her shadow fell backward. Afterward, when the guests had gone, the Duke would come to the muniment room and she would read the evening back to him, and he would hear his own table again. And it is a strange schooling for a man, hearing himself verbatim. He learned that he interrupted. He learned that Mr. Girdler said, as it were, when he was unsure and never otherwise. He learned that a dinner he had thought went well contained, read cold, 4 sentences he wished unsaid. "Your father used to call this the second dinner," she said one evening. "He said the first one is eaten and the second one is true." In between, there was the searching. She worked through the anonymous volumes in the evenings, and because the work was slow, she began, at the Duke's asking and then at his waiting, to read parts aloud. It started as business. It did not stay business, because the books were not minutes, they were rooms. Her father had taken down everything, and so the 6th Duke of Harewell was in them alive, interrupting engineers, laughing at a bad survey, ordering the windows opened in July, dictating letters and then striking them and dictating them better. His son sat in the muniment room week after week and listened to a voice 19 months in the grave conduct its business as if death were a rumor. He did not say what it was to him. He was not a man who said what things were to him. But he began arriving earlier, and Mrs. Farrant began sending in a tray with 2 cups on it without being asked, and the space between the Duke of Harewell and the woman he had hidden behind a screen filled up, evening by evening, with a dead man's living voice and 2 people listening to it together. She watched him learn his father over again. That was the part she had not planned for. She had planned for the work, priced her sittings, set her terms like fences. She had not planned for the way he went still when the old Duke said something kind, as if kindness out of that voice were a coin found in a coat. In the 2nd week of April, at 10 in the evening, she found it. She knew it before she read a line, because her father had ruled a double line down the margin, which he did perhaps twice a year, and beside the date, the 14th of March, he had written in longhand, which he never did. His Grace ordered this taken down twice. She sat alone with it for a quarter of an hour. Then she carried the volume through the dark house to the library, where the light was still burning, and knocked, and did not wait to be bid. "I have him," she said. "Will you hear it now, or in the morning with Mr. Girdler?" "Now," said the Duke. So she stood by the fire with volume 87 open on her arm, and read him a dinner 9 years gone. 6 gentlemen at table. Sir Humphrey Beckford laying out the Leadwell navigation with figures she read exactly as her father had caught them, and the figures did not agree with themselves inside of 10 minutes. Colonel Rush asking twice where the water was to come from and being answered both times about the money instead. And then the 6th Duke of Harewell verbatim after the cloth was drawn. Sir Humphrey, I have heard you out, and I will say this once before these gentlemen so that it need never be said again. I will put no money and no name into water that runs uphill. Do not come to me softly in 6 months to ask it twice. And Sir Humphrey Beckford, verbatim, after a silence, her father had marked at 4 seconds. Then I must shift as I can, your grace, and you will forgive me if I remember this evening differently. Laughter around the table, her father noted. Sir H. also laughing, his grace not. Then the double line, and below it, dictated after the guests had gone, the late Duke walking the room while Holt wrote. Take that down twice, Holt, and keep it dry. That man has just told me to my face what he will do when I'm dead, and the table thought it was wit. Note also, my son met him in the hall tonight and would not shake his hand until he had looked at him first. Jonathan would have seen through this scheme in half the time it took me. I have never told him so. Amend that, Holt. Find me a day, and I will tell him so. The pen strokes ended. There was no amendment. There had been no day. Abigail closed the volume gently, the way one closes a door on the sleeping, and looked up, and the Duke of Harewell was standing with his back to her and his hand flat on the chimney-piece, and she gave him what she had learned behind screens to give, which was silence with a person inside it. He never said it, the Duke said at last. His voice was level. It was the kind of level that costs. 19 months I have been sitting in his chair, certain I was a poor copy of him, and it was written down the whole time, in a wet book, on a bottom shelf. It was written down, she said, because he meant it. My father did not take down air. He turned. Whatever he had been going to say, he did not say, because dukes are trained young in the things one does not say to a woman in one's employ at 11 at night. What he said instead was, "Thank you, Miss Holt," and what he did was cross the room and take her hand, not to kiss it, which is performance, but to hold it, which is not, and for a moment the only sound in the library was the fire working. 2 guineas the sitting, she said, not taking the hand back, and this was not a sitting. No, he agreed. This one I owe you whole. Sir Humphrey Beckford was not a fool. He was something more dangerous, a man who had been believed all his life and had come to regard belief as his income. When word reached him that the Holt woman was installed at Harewell Court, he did 3 things in April, in order, each one recorded somewhere he did not suspect. First, he swore. Not an oath of temper, but an affidavit, before a magistrate at Worcester, setting down his account of the 14th of March in full, the port, the guarantee, the handshake, the initialed memorandum, so that his story was now fixed in law and could not wear down or grow. Mr. Girdler obtained a copy and brought it to the muniment room, and Abigail read it once and laid it beside her father's volume without a word, the way a jeweler lays paste beside stone. Second, he wrote to the county, not one letter but many, all different, all the same. The phrase that traveled was pothooks and hangers, a spinster with pothooks and hangers, who might write anything in her scratches and call it a dead man's gospel. Who would swear to marks that no Christian could read? The county, which had been enjoying the screen, began to enjoy the phrase. It reached Harewell by way of a dinner guest's unguarded repetition, and went, like everything else, into the book. He is not wrong, Abigail said that evening, and the Duke looked up sharply. That is what makes him dangerous, your grace. To any jury, it is scratches. My father knew it. It is why he kept every original, dated, docketed in sequence, never a page cut out, so that the whole shelf vouches for every line. But a shelf cannot speak. Someone must read it aloud, and the someone is a woman, and Sir Humphrey means to try the woman and not the books. Then how is it answered? She was quiet for a moment. In the quiet was the whole shape of what came after. You do not answer a man like that with paper, she said. Paper he can call forged. You answer him with a demonstration he cannot survive. He believes the scratches can say anything. Very well, we will let him watch them say exactly what he himself has said, the moment after he has said it, in front of witnesses, in your dining room, And then, while the room is still cold, we will let them say what he said 9 years ago. He has demanded I be revealed, Your Grace. I think we should oblige him. Third, and lastly, Sir Humphrey came to Harewell Court himself, uninvited on a wet Tuesday, and asked, since his Grace was regrettably out, whether he might pay his respects to Miss Holt, whom he had heard so much of. Mrs. Farrant, who could no more be outflanked in her own hall than the staircase could, put him in the small parlor, sent Thomas the footman to stand outside the door with the silver he was pretending to polish, and fetched Abigail herself. He was charming. That was the first thing she recorded afterward. Charm laid on thick and even, like dripping on bread. He was so very sorry for her father's death, a loss to the county, a remarkable man, and remarkable too the burden now resting on the daughter, and here his voice dropped into the confidential register that other people's voices climbed into. Volumes could be misread, damp volumes especially. It would grieve him to see a respectable young woman made ridiculous in an assize court over marks on wet paper, when the relevant volume, he understood the labels were spoiled, might so easily never be found at all. He was prepared, out of regard for her late father, to offer £500 for the spoiled volumes, as curiosities. "You are the collector," she said. The charm did not move, but something behind it did, a small shift, like a floor settling. "I collect certainty, Miss Holt. All men of business do." "Then I will give you some for nothing, Sir Humphrey. The volumes are not for sale, they are no longer in this house, and since the day your first letter offered £40, there has been a fair copy of the year in question made in my hand, attested page by page before Mr. Girdler, and lodged where you may guess. Burn what you like. It is too late by 14 months. She curtsied correctly and left him with the settling floor, and went up to the muniment room, and took down his visit while it was hot, every word, and under it, in her father's manner, in longhand, one line. He came to price the truth, and learned it has been copied. Then she sat with her hands flat on the table until they were steady again, because composure is not the absence of the storm, only the keeping of it, and she had just threatened a baronet in a house where she ate her dinners behind a screen. The Duke, when he returned and heard it read, did not speak until the end. Then he said, quietly, "He walked into my house and offered my witness money, and the anger in it was not hot. It was the other kind, the kind that settles in and pays rent. Your witness," she said, "invited him to. Now he believes the fair copy is the danger, and he will come to your table in June to destroy the copy's credit, mine, in person, before the county. He will come, Your Grace, because he cannot afford not to. Set the dinner." The cards went out the first week of June. The Duke of Harewell requested the pleasure. Sir Humphrey Beckford and Mr. Sopworth, his attorney, that everything might be open and above the board. Colonel Rush, whom nobody had thought to ask about anything in 9 years. Mr. Girdler. 2 neighboring gentlemen of unimpeachable dullness, chosen as a jury, is chosen. And at the right hand of the Duke's place, when the party came in to dine on the 11th of June, stood the screen, black lacquer, white cranes, exactly where the county's favourite story said it would be. Sir Humphrey looked at it the way a fox looks at a trap it has decided is a feeding trough, and smiled and sat down well. The dinner of the 11th of June was, by every account the county later traded, excellent. Mrs. Farrant had seen to that on principle. Sir Humphrey ate well and talked better, and by the second course he had arrived, as she had said he must, at his grievance, and told it to the table in its finished form, polished now by 4 months of telling. The port, the library, the handshake, the late Duke's hand on his shoulder, a detail 3 weeks old, and the words solemnly rendered, "Humphrey, you shall not lose by me." He told it with his eyes wet. He was good. It was the kind of performance that succeeds precisely because the performer has come to believe the last version he told. Mr. Sopworth watched his client with the fixed expression of an attorney, listening to sworn testimony, grow a 4th new detail. "And so, Your Grace," Sir Humphrey concluded, opening his palms to the table, "I ask only what your father promised, I am told," and here he turned, unhurried, savouring it, toward the black lacquer and the white cranes, "that the answer is to come from behind a screen. from scratches on wet paper, made by hands unknown, read to us by a person your grace does not permit us to see. If his grace means to answer me out of a dead man's scribble, let him at least produce the scribbler. I say it before this company. Whoever sits behind that screen, let her be revealed." "You have said it before this company," agreed the Duke of Harewell, and set down his glass. "Very well." He rose and crossed to the screen and folded back the first panel himself. She came out with no haste at all. Deep garnet red silk, dark blonde hair off her face, her father's black writing case under her arm, and she made her correct curtsy to the table as a whole and to Sir Humphrey not at all. And if the county wanted a story, it had one now, because the woman behind the Duke of Harewell's screen was young and composed and had ink on the middle finger of her right hand. "Miss Holt," said the Duke, "has been at my right hand these 15 weeks. You have asked for her. You shall have her entire." "A test first," Abigail said, before Sir Humphrey's opening expression had finished arranging itself. Her voice was level, unhurried, the voice of a woman stating the boiling point of water. Sir Humphrey has told this county that shorthand is scratches which may be made to say anything. That is a fair challenge, and it deserves a fair answer. I have sat behind that screen since the soup. Colonel Rush, will you do me the kindness of confirming or denying what I read, since your memory of this very evening is not yet 9 years old?" She opened the case, took out the book, and read the dinner back to them. Not a summary. The dinner. Mr. Sopworth asking twice for the salt and apologizing twice. The younger Mr. Wheel's remark about the lateness of the hay. Colonel Rush's story of the peninsula stopped in the same place it was always stopped. Sir Humphrey's grievance entire, the port, the library, the handshake, the hand on the shoulder, "You shall not lose by me," every sentence exact, until the table heard its own last hour walk back through the room, and the two dull, unimpeachable gentlemen sat forward, and Colonel Rush said, word for word, by God I'll swear it." "And then," Abigail said, turning one page, "at 17 minutes past 8 by the mantel clock, Sir Humphrey leaned to Mr. Sopworth and said beneath the general talk, and she read it in the same level voice, 'He will pay before he lets his father's name into a courtroom. Press him past 10 and settle at 8. The room went the particular kind of quiet that has a temperature. Sir Humphrey's face performed a small landslide and rebuilt itself. "A trick," he said. "Planted. Prepared beforehand. You will know best, sir, whether those words could have been prepared beforehand," she said, "since until you whispered them, they had never been said aloud in this house. That is the whole of the demonstration. The scratches take down what is truly said, when it is said. By whom? Your Grace, shall I go on to the 14th of March? "Go on," said the Duke, and he was not looking at the book. He was looking at Sir Humphrey, and his look was his father's. She lifted volume 87 from the case, opened it to the doubled line, stated the date, the company, and her father's docket, and read the dinner of 9 years ago into the room. The figures that quarreled with themselves. Colonel Rush's twice-asked question about the water, at which the colonel slowly reddened with vindication. And then the 6th Duke of Harewell, word for word. "I will put no money and no name into water that runs uphill," and after the marked 4 seconds of silence, Sir Humphrey Beckford, word for word. "Then I must shift as I can, Your Grace, and you will forgive me if I remember this evening differently." "You laughed as you said it," she added, closing the book. "My father noted the laughter. He noted also that His Grace did not laugh. His Grace ordered the passage taken down twice and kept dry. It was." Colonel Rush brought his hand flat down on the cloth. "Water that runs uphill. 9 years I have carried that phrase, and could not have told you where I got it. I sat at that table, gentlemen. I will sign anything." And here the thing happened that always happened. The thing she had watched happened to borrowed competence all her life. Sir Humphrey did not rage. He reached for the next version, because there had always been a next version, and found the shelf empty. His mouth opened on the port, the library, the handshake, and every one of them was now a fresh count against him, sworn in an affidavit that sat in Mr. Girdler's pocket, and disagreed with a book that had just proved in front of 6 witnesses that it did not lie. He looked at Mr. Sopworth. Mr. Sopworth was looking at the tablecloth with the expression of a man calculating the distance between himself and a charge of subornation, and finding it shorter than the distance to the door. "Your Grace," Mr. Sopworth said carefully, "I wonder whether my client and I might have the use of a room." "You may have the use of that one," said the Duke, "and paper will be brought. Mr. Girdler will attend you. I will have the withdrawal in writing tonight, with the memorandum surrendered. Or the assizes may have all of it. The claim, the affidavit, and the offer of £500 made to my witness in my own house on the 3rd of May, which is also Sir Humphrey written down." Sir Humphrey Beckford stood. For a moment, the charm hung on him like a coat on a gate. "You are your father entire," he said, and meant it for a blow. "Thank you," said the Duke of Harewell, and meant it. The withdrawal was signed at 10:30 at the sideboard, Mr. Sopworth drafting, Abigail standing at the Duke's shoulder, reading each line as it went down, because she read everything now, and no one questioned it. The memorandum with its initials was given up and proved, in the event, to be paper of a make first sold 3 years after the dinner it claimed to record, but by then no one needed it. Sir Humphrey quitted the county before the harvest, to try his certainty on a district that had not heard him twice. When the last wheels had gone on the gravel, the Duke stood a while in his dining room. The servants were clearing. The screen stood where it had stood since February. 3 panels of black lacquer, 30 years of his mother's morning room, and 15 weeks of a hired woman's hiding. "Haddon," he said to his steward, "take the screen away, and set a chair there. It is to be laid for dinner every day." Then he walked to the muniment room, where she was entering the evening while it was hot, and stood in his doorway and did not supervise. "The books are searched," he said. "The claim is dead. By your own terms, the volumes go home with you now." "They do." Her pen finished its line and stopped. "I find," said the Duke of Harewell, "that I have spent 15 weeks hearing my father's voice, and the sentence I keep is none of his. It is a woman telling me she would sit behind my screen, and that I would discover in time which of us it hid." He came into the room. "I have discovered it. It hid me. Every day of my life I am read to before I am spoken to, arranged at, performed for. You are the one person in the county who takes me down as I am. I do not want the books to go home, Abigail. I want the books and their keeper, and the ink on that finger, at my right hand, in plain view, for the rest of my life. Marry me." She looked at him for 4 seconds. She counted them, from old habit, and would tell him the number every year after. "On the record, your Grace?" "On the record." She took up her pen, and beneath the account of the evening, she wrote 1 line in longhand, dated it, and turned the book for him to see. "Asked in the muniment room. Answered, yes." Then, because some things do not belong to the record, she put the pen down. 2 years on an October evening, the library at Harewell Court held a good fire, and before the fire stood a small fire screen of black lacquer with 1 white crane, cut down from a larger thing by the estate joiner, who had been given strange instructions and had followed them exactly. It is the only screen at Harewell now, and nothing sits behind it but the flames. The Duchess of Harewell keeps the archive still. 119 volumes, for a new one was begun the day after the wedding, and on its first page, in a fast fair hand, is a full account of a marriage at Comberton Church, including what the bridegroom whispered at the signing of the register, which she took down out of habit and has refused ever since to read to visitors. Twice a week 2 pupils come up from the village, a tenant's daughter and the schoolmaster's girl, and sit at the long table learning her father's method, because a memory should never again depend on 1 pair of hands. Her husband comes in most evenings at the same hour and stands a moment in the doorway, out of old habit, watching her write. There is a chair for him at her right hand. It is always laid. "Anything worth taking down twice?" he asks. "Everything," says the Duchess of Harewell, "since February."